Oh my goodness. Can you believe it? There are rumblings and reports that we could see Russell Wilson with the Las Vegas Raiders. It's orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. Mace, we've danced around this. Now, Jeremy Fowler, very good reporter from ESPN, is saying these are rumblings that he's hearing about Wilson potentially landing with the hated Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, let's not call it a report. Let's call it what it is. This is the prediction of an unnamed executive with an NFC team that Fowler cites in the article, suggesting that Russell Wilson will be a Las Vegas Raider and pointing out that a couple of years ago when Wilson was making his list of teams to which he would accept a trade, that the Las Vegas Raiders were one of them. Even the unnamed executive goes as far as mentioning that, Sierra could have a residency in Las Vegas if he's playing for the Raiders. But probably just as big an impact there is that Russ and Sierra's home base is San Diego. Las Vegas, not too far away, keeps him out west. And it isn't mentioned in the article, but maybe the idea of getting revenge on the Broncos and Sean Payton would be a motivating factor if Russell Wilson goes to the Raiders.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think it could be. And honestly, Mace, I thought of the Sierra residency when I was considering Vegas before I read the report from Jeremy Fowler, an unnamed NFC executive. Sounds like John Schneider to me. Could totally be wrong, but it's just like, okay, we're connecting dots, but these are dots that make sense for the Raiders and honestly for Russell Wilson as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders are sitting there picking 13th, of course, by beating the Broncos in Week 18 earlier this month. That knocked the Raiders behind Denver in draft position. Had the Raiders gotten Jim Harbaugh as their head coach, I think we'd be having a different conversation because that would have put them squarely in the J.J. McCarthy sweepstakes to have the reunion, of course, between the still current Michigan head coach, he hasn't taken any job in the NFL yet, and the quarterback who is turning pro in this cycle. But that seems to be cooling a bit. And the Raiders may look at their 5-4 finish and look at it in the way they should have looked at the finish they had in 2021 when they went to the playoffs with interim head coach Rich Bisaccia and say, okay, we're not that far away. Maybe a Russell Wilson could push us over the top. The question would then be, what kind of offense do you want to run if you're the Las Vegas Raiders? And is Russell Wilson right to run that offense compared to Aiden O'Connell, who looked to be making some very nice strides there at the end of the season? Of course, his rookie campaign for the Raiders.
Right. And with Russell Wilson, it would come, okay, strong defense. They've certainly got playmakers. And because they kept Antonio Pierce, now you got Max Crosby staying, of course, Davante Adams, Jacoby Myers on offense. And then you have to say, well, are you keeping Josh Jacobs or are you rolling with Zamir White, who's very capable, but like you better have a strong rushing attack if you have Russell Wilson. Plus, Mace, it's Antonio Pierce, who we both appreciate, certainly as a head coach for the Raiders. But you're in a division with potentially Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, Andy Reid, who's making that run again with the Chiefs, and Sean Payton. Do you really have time to mess around with a veteran that's going to play kind of chaos football?
That's a very fair question. Now, if you're the Raiders, maybe if you're playing the QB wins angle, you're looking and saying, well, Russell Wilson was the quarterback of record when the Broncos stopped that streak to Kansas City. He was the quarterback of record for the first Bronco win over the Chargers this year. So maybe you look at that and say, okay, we can work with this. And if you're Antonio Pierce, if you bring in Russell Wilson, you're committing to the high variance of Russell Wilson from drive to drive and moment to moment, which is something that Sean Payton seemed to struggle with as part and parcel of Russell Wilson. The highs can be exceptionally high, but the highs are generally beyond play structure, which means there's a little bit more inconsistency in terms of how you're going about things offensively. And this is where what offense the Raiders run is fascinating, because if they were running their Josh McDaniels type of offense, you wouldn't really want a high variance quarterback, right?
No.
But if you're considering Russell Wilson, that's an indication that Antonio Pierce wants to do things differently on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and in the AFC West, seeing Russell Wilson twice a year in a Raiders uniform, I'm not going to use the word hate, Mace, because one, I don't think we should be using that word. I don't necessarily think fans hate Russell Wilson. There's certainly a lot of dislike out there for him. Hell, some people still think he's going to stay with Denver. That's probably not going to happen, everybody. But the distaste for Wilson going to those guys. Wilson goes to Atlanta, whatever, out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
Wilson goes to the Raiders. It's going to lead Sports Center. They're going to see him twice a year. Like, this just causes more kind of those hate-filled feelings. And I'm old enough to remember when Lyle Alzado left and, ended up playing for the Raiders. And I remember my family, again, Broncos country is my family. But I remember how that really impacted some opinions about Lyle Alzado with Broncos fans who I grew up with.
Well, the funny thing about Alzado is he had a stopover in Cleveland before getting to the hated silver and black of the Raiders, right?
Right.
There were a few years there. Oh, it's fine. He's in Cleveland, whatever. And then he goes to the Raiders. And this would change the dynamic, no doubt, of how people feel about Russell Wilson in Denver. I guarantee that it would, even though he may not have many choices as to where he wants to go in terms of moving on from Denver. It's going to be the notion that if he goes to Vegas, he will have chosen Vegas. He will have chosen the Raiders.
Right.
And certainly if that happens, there will be a less than welcome reception waiting for Russell Wilson when he returns to Denver. And, oh, by the way, the other thing is you might want to put that Broncos Raiders game in Denver in prime time, maybe even do what you did when Russell Wilson went from the Seahawks to the Broncos, have that right out of the blocks in week one. If you do the Monday Night Football doubleheader again, maybe you have that be the late game, perhaps.
Perhaps that's what happens with the Broncos. But Joey, let's get that graphic ready, because is there a chance, Mace, where we see the quarterbacks flip-flopped for the Raiders and the Broncos? Russell Wilson in Las Vegas, Jimmy Garoppolo here. You see the dead money for these players with their respective teams. I know that fans, we merely mention Jimmy Garoppolo and fans lose their mind, and I get it, right? I understand that, but it's the business of football. Could we see Wilson in Las Vegas and then Garoppolo here?
It's entirely possible, and I think if you go on the surface, you'd say, okay, advantage Raiders. First of all, throw that graphic up there again. Look at the dead money figure for the two quarterbacks. It's not ideal for the Raiders to absorb $28.3 million of dead money, but that's right there about 1/3 of the Russell Wilson dead money. And like with Wilson, the Raiders could spread it over 2 years and they could make it very reasonable. But Jimmy Garoppolo, in his 6 starts for the Raiders last year, didn't play well. Passer rating below 80. In fact, of the seasons in which he has started games over the course of his career, so throwing out the first 2 years when his work was just spot work off the bench for New England, the passer rating and QBR are the lowest that he's had. And, oh, by the way, both of them substantially lower than what Russell Wilson had for the Broncos with Sean Payton in the 2023 season. Now, that being said, Jimmy Garoppolo, a rhythm and timing passer who ought to work very well in Sean Payton's offense. The question on Garoppolo is, can he stay healthy, right? Injuries have been part and parcel of him for the last few years. They struck again this past year with the Raiders. You almost look at Jimmy Garoppolo right now at this stage of his career and say, if you bring him in, you have to count on him missing 3 to 5 games. So you better have a good backup. I think if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, that he's very much a bridge type of quarterback at this point. And I don't think you'd be looking at Garoppolo having the Baker Mayfield kind of revival. For one thing, Garoppolo is a few years older down the line in his career than Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, but also the skill set of Jimmy Garoppolo, more about rhythm, timing, keeping the offense on schedule rather than being able to still do some spectacular things. Garoppolo is a perfectly cromulent bridge, I think, but no more than that.
Yeah, and it's not sexy by any means. Fans certainly won't like it, but Sean Payton might. And we said it yesterday, Mason. It's worth bringing up on today's show as well. Like, all right, what are players now, and what can they be? I'm not making a definitive, declaration on Jarrett Stidham, but we didn't see what we needed to see in those 2 games. I know just 2 games, but the guy prepared all year, probably knowing that, hey, you're going to get a shot. I'm sure that was a behind the scenes conversation that went on. Like, you just be ready. We might be going to just be ready. And when they did go to him, he didn't look ready. And I think it's unfortunate for Stidham and maybe even for Sean Payton, because he handpicked this guy. You wouldn't be in the Garoppolo sweepstakes, if you even are, if Stidham had looked better in those 2 games.
Right. And if the Broncos decide to ride with Stidham, then to me, that says they're taking a first-round quarterback, and in particular, taking a first-round quarterback who is probably going to be ready sooner rather than later, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is somebody you could take and then say, all right, we could go the J.J. McCarthy route. We could even wait until day 2 and be talking about Michael Pratt or Sam Hartman as options to develop behind Garoppolo. And maybe you're talking about Garoppolo having a 1 or 2 year break stint. Jarrett Stidham at this point, and it's not just the 4 starts. Yes, the 4 starts are pretty limited, but it took him until his 4th season to get those starting opportunities. Back in 2020, he had a chance to be New England starter. In fact, the Patriots were hoping Jarrett Stidham would show enough in 2020 to be the starter following Tom Brady when they moved on from him. But Stidham did not show enough, and ultimately they decided to bring in Cam Newton, a very battered and beaten up Cam Newton after 9 years of taking hits in Carolina. So to me, that says an awful lot, that there was an opportunity for Jarrett Stidham to potentially be a starter. He wasn't able to seize it. And then you fast forward 2+ years to his first 2 starts, and then another year to his second 2 starts. And oh, by the way, the best start he's had was his first start for the Raiders against the 49ers. It has been decidedly mixed in terms of his results since then, which tells you the teams going against him, they know what he can do. They know what his weaknesses are. They figured him out.
Yeah, they know what they've got a book on him, right? We always said that, like, there's a book, usually takes teams about a month, and then they'll figure out, and then you've got to have something else to do. You've got to have that next card to play. And it seems like with Stidham, he's played his hand, and we know what it is right now.
Yeah, part of the book on Jarrett Stidham is that you can confuse him with certain pressure looks, right?
Right.
And we saw that especially against the Raiders. I mean, there was a play against the Chargers where he, basically ran into Ben Powers and got sacked, right? He doesn't appear to have the feel for dealing with the pass rush that you need to have in order to succeed in the NFL. And that, based on what I have seen, puts a very distinct Stidham or ceiling on what Stidham can accomplish.
Right. So will we see Russell Wilson in Las Vegas? Will we see Jimmy Garoppolo in Denver? As Gary Kubiak said, Mace, we are fixing to find out. And that's why this offseason, I've said this is the most important draft in recent Broncos history. And they don't have a lot that they can do free agency wise, but like just this offseason, the decisions that are made, who are you keeping? Who are you trading? Who is your quarterback? There's going to be ripples and waves and butterfly effects that are felt for years to come based on the decisions made in the next month or 2.
Right. And I mean, just think about 6 years ago, the ripples and lingering effects from the Broncos not taking Josh Allen, instead taking Bradley Chubb. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear about that. Oh, why replay that? You bring that up because it's one of those demarcation points. To quote Robert Frost, it's the road not taken, or 2 roads diverging in the yellow wood, right? However you want to refer to it as. You could say the Broncos took the one less traveled by, again, continuing the Robert Frost references. and it's made all the difference. The Broncos took the road of saying, let's not take a quarterback. Let's take an edge rusher. And so if you pass on QB this year, let's say that Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy are all still on the board. You pass on QB, and then one of those goes on to be successful, and you're the Broncos, you're probably going to end up kicking yourself over what it might have been. And again, the one thing they haven't tried in the entire post-Peyton Manning era, the one thing they have not tried is a quarterback drafted in the first half of the first round. They've picked late first round quarterback, a day 2 quarterback, day 3 quarterback. That was Trevor Siemian, who of course started in 2016 and 2017. They've tried free agents. They've traded for guys, scrap heap guys. Nothing's worked. You have to try the premium pick, and I think the way that the draft is shaping up, I still think this is the time for the Broncos to do it.
Yes, it's the time for the Broncos to do it, and Mason and I will be on the road at both the Shrine Game and the Senior Bowl. Lots more Orange and Blue Today coming up for you. He is Andrew Mason. You can follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey. We're growing our YouTube channel, so please help us out by like comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell
so that you never miss a vid.
That's
Our
right.
timing was a little off there.
It was. We'll fix it. We'll fix it in post. Anyway. No, we won't. He's Mace. I'm Cease. OBT is a BFD. Thanks. Peace and grace to you all. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.